All right, we are live. Welcome to the Saga, the Clone Saga, a podcast presented by the students of S.H.I.E.L.D. We are going through the daunting task of reading and then explaining the entire infamous 1990s Spider-Man Clone Saga. I'm hosting this week. I'm Michael Spack. You know me by now. Want to congratulate that Matt is finally back here.
Yes.
And we'll kick it out here for, we're finally here, guys. We are at the beginning of finally the Clone Saga. So
yeah, it's been a journey.
All right, I'm Vincent tuning in.
Billy.
Oh yeah, as Mike said, I'm Matt.
And Nick is currently out of the country. He cannot be here this week. So sponsor this week, and since Matt is back, Matt, who's our sponsor this week?
All right, this week our show is sponsored by this pair of pants. You can wear it on your legs.
Thank you. Thank you to that pair of pants for sponsoring this episode.
I'm wearing a pair right now.
So as Mike said, we are finally starting the actual Clone Saga on our 7th episode. And so we're covering the Power and Responsibility arc. And real quick, I addressed this at the end of the last episode that we did, but there was a little bit of goofing, but it doesn't really matter ultimately. In our reading order between our last episode and this episode is actually where they put a bunch of Mystery Man excerpts, which was Ben Reilly popping up, and none of them really mattered. A few episodes ago, we did the final appearance, which directly leads into this. And then there's a little bit, I believe, in those issues, like it explains why Aunt May is in the hospital, but ultimately that doesn't really matter, and we know she's in the hospital. So moving in, this is a 4-part crossover across the 4 monthly Spider-Man titles at the time. And I believe the only other superheroes who've supported 4 titles in history have been Superman and Batman. And it's kind of iffy with Batman because Legends of the Dark Knight, which would be like his 4th title, it was not necessarily always like telling stories alongside the other books. A lot of it was flashbacks and stuff like that. All of this arc has a publication date of October 1994. And I usually
a year away from my birthday.
Yeah, I was born in. The 3 of us are a little bit out. We'll be born shortly. And so in the few previous episodes, I've done some of the credits at the beginning, but I'm going to do the issue details as we get to them because these are 4 separate series with 4 different creative teams. And all of these issues, though, were $1.50. All right, so moving right in, the first issue.
Is that industry standard in '94?
I'm not sure. But even still, like, you can kind of think of it like $1.50 an issue. So you're paying $6 to read pretty much every Spider-Man thing, which is actually somewhat comparable to now. Actually, it would be a little bit cheaper because now if you were just buying Amazing Spider-Man, it often ships twice a month. And you're paying $8.
Remember when it was shipping 3 times a month?
What?
Remember when it was shipping 3 times a month?
Yeah. So the first part of the story kicks off in Web of Spider-Man 117. And this is written by Terry Kavanagh. And it's a shame that Nick is not with us because Terry Kavanagh, also known for having a lengthy run on Mark Spector Moon Knight. And otherwise, he's also known he wrote a lot of X-Man. The series starring Nate Gray.
Oh man, why didn't we get? Kipe should have been here.
Yeah, to acknowledge that one reference. And so Kavanagh,
that one thing, he could leave.
Kavanagh has been writing Web of Spider-Man at this point since issue 97, but he also had like an earlier run at some point, like about a year. But there was a gap in between it. So he was involved with Maximum Carnage a bit back, and also. A lot of you probably know the infamous suit from issue 100 of Web of Spider-Man.
Awesome diamond armored suit.
So Terry Kavanagh also wrote that issue, and I guess probably co-created that. And this issue is drawn by Stephen Butler. All right, so what happens in this issue, guys?
What? I didn't really. I thought this was started out a little bit rough, just because like I only know Terry Kavanagh by name. I didn't know who that artist was. I was like, oh, kind of a little bit of a slog, but I think it just kind of felt like kind of skippable because like when we get to the second like the Amazing Spider-Man issue, it feels like kind of picked up. Like it didn't really feel like it was just kind of tacked on because we have 4 monthly titles and we need to fill them out.
Yeah, frankly, it doesn't really feel like much happens in this issue. Although, like that first page, I think is kind of as iconic as anything in the Clone Saga can get. Like I've seen that image before, but like overall, this issue, not a whole lot really happens.
Yeah,
I mean, we're going to get there since we have 4 monthly books. It's going to feel like stories are stretched out to this 4-issue length because we have to fill them all out.
Yeah, that I was actually thinking that as well. And even like the pacing is even weird, just issue to issue, like we said. Like, not much happens in this one, and then I'm pretty sure the way I saw it was the 4th issue, the finale. Like, actually, quite a bit happens. The 3rd and 4th, things really go crazy. And also, you were talking about how you didn't recognize the artist and like you don't really know Terry Kavanagh and everything like that. I felt also one of the issues, which we'll get to later, is drawn by an artist who has like a pretty significantly different style. But I felt Stephen Butler in this issue, he's like almost like Mark Bagley light, who is one of the other artists. Like I feel like you can. I don't know if he was like intentionally trying to mimic Bagley's style or what, but like you can see like that he especially draws Spider-Man in a very similar way.
I don't know if it was so much Bagley, but I just got a house style from it.
Yeah,
I really noticed it in MJ's face actually. Yeah.
So in the beginning of this story, we kind of get some backstory, which I've mentioned on an episode before or two, that right before the Clone Saga, Peter's parents seemed to show up, and they were actually around for a little bit, but obviously they were fake. And in fact, in one of these issues, he name checks the word for what they are. They were replicoids.
Oh God!
And it was the chameleon screwing around with him, and because of that, and I guess various other things or whatever, going insane.
He's not having a fun time.
I'm sure Billy is appreciating Peter Parker just looking like a complete mess in this story.
He's always a complete mess. It's not like he's ever had it really together.
Yeah, but it's a little different though. A little different kind of mess. I like he has the underwebs. You notice that in a few panels. So yeah, it picks right back up with with Pete and Ben on the roof, and Pete just chases him around because for a while
he doesn't chase. He attacks him. He doesn't ask questions. He just starts attacking.
Yeah,
like a dick.
Pete's an asshole.
Yeah, he's got some bloodlust in this story. Well, I mean, it's somewhat understandable. Again, like I said, like, so maybe it's another replicoid or something. It's everything like that. And then we get introduced to Ravencroft Hospital, which is...
Oh, you mean Arkham Asylum?
Yeah.
Featured in Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Is that in Amazing Spider-Man 2?
Yeah.
We don't talk about Amazing Spider-Man 2.
I don't think I've seen that movie since the theater.
Wait, when is it in Amazing Spider-Man 2? Is it like the ending?
Ashley Kafka is a male, and he is where they lock up Electro.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Yeah.
He gets locked up? I thought he just kind of disintegrates.
I mean, that's how he escapes, but like he's getting tortured and everything.
Who cares? Who cares? The movie's trash.
It is.
I hate that movie.
But so yeah, Dr. Kafka, and then her head of security is John Jameson Jr., the Man-Wolf. I feel like he doesn't have his powers at this point. Like I know there was some like have his powers for a long time, but we don't see. There's no reference to that at all.
Right.
And then we get introduced to our villain of sorts.
Oh god, I don't.
Is
I
he
did
a
not
villain?
care about this guy at all.
His motives are just
They don't
really
they don't make much
Doesn't
sense.
make any sense.
All right, so we're talking about Judas Traveler, which is a ridiculous name. And Judas Traveler introduces himself as a philosopher and psychologist. And his specific field of interest is the nature of evil.
It looks like he stole Doctor Strange's clothes and dyed them a different color.
Yeah, his costume's kind of weird because he definitely doesn't look like a scientist. Like when he shows up to Kafka, it's not like he puts on his costume.
He
when
woke up in
starts
the
doing
morning
bullshit.
and decided, this is the look I'm going with.
Yeah, he's kind of like bootleg Doctor Strange, but also he has a big thing for bling. He has like multiple chains, and he
It
has
was
like
the
this
90s.
weird gauntlet thing.
That's how you showed off your status.
Yeah, and so Judas Traveler ostensibly shows up to like help run and consult Ravencroft, and then he just takes it over.
Something tells me they didn't do a background check at him at all. They're like, yeah, all right, you look qualified.
Yeah, he also brings in
he
all.
says he's a psychologist.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing is like, so his credentials are legit. That's the way it's explained. He's like I think he is actually a psychologist who's written books and everything. It's just now he's a villain. Has he always been a villain?
Is Spider-Man a villain? I think so.
He has villainous moments in this story.
Billy's a pretty good Carnage. He rips the symbiote off of Cletus Cassidy. Billy, how'd you feel about that?
I mean, it's pretty fucking stupid, but it made for an interesting panel because it's like, damn, this guy is legit, even though they don't explain his powers at all, if he even has fucking powers.
He's OP as fuck.
Yeah.
He's just, he is kind of like Doctor Strange. He just has like ambiguous, mystical, or some kind of powerful abilities.
I think the way he was like talking in that panel made it seem like the symbiote was scared of him, and that's why it separated from Cassidy. But Cassidy wasn't scared of him, so he kind of stayed in place.
Yeah.
And that's really fucking stupid.
What I really think is funny, I'm just kind of scrolling through, is every book that whoever's on art duties progressively draws Aunt May in the hospital more and more like a corpse.
He looks like a corpse when he's alive.
Yeah.
Like up and walking.
Yeah, but like by the time we're at that fourth issue, she looks like a fucking skeleton.
Just pull a plug.
So Judas Traveler, well, a plug does get pulled.
Yeah, not the right one.
Yeah.
It doesn't pull, it just falls out.
Yeah. So Judas Traveler basically just gives us a tour, and the only inmates he shows us, or at least the superpowered ones, it's Carnage, as we mentioned, the Chameleon, which comes back later and is referring to the past story that I've talked about, and then Shriek, who I don't think we've officially seen Shriek yet, but we've mentioned her a few times because she's linked to both Carnage and Carrion. And
I was going to say that Shriek from Batman Beyond is probably better.
Sure.
Also, the artists couldn't decide on. I know they're separate teams, but like they didn't seem to have a constant with how Chameleon is dealing with his newfound insanity at not knowing what his face looks like. Because in the first issue, he has like that blank face, and then in I don't know if it's the next one or the third issue, but he's like shifting faces. So, like that stuck out to me.
So Judas Traveler summons Spider-Man, and he's either going to kill all the prisoners or he's going to let them all go. And somehow Spider-Man showing up is going to choose one or prevent both.
And then he doesn't either.
Just like Judas Traveler's plan, and it sort of makes sense, like as we see what he's actually summoning Spider-Man for. But like the explanation he gives to Peter doesn't make any sense. And Peter goes on for like 3 pages. He's like, it's a no-win situation. Like he uses that exact wording like 5 times. And that's pretty much where we end, and then the end of the first issue, it's like, oh, Ben Reilly might help him. Like, Ben Reilly had just gotten away when Peter gets summoned by Judas Traveler, and then Ben Reilly's just there. Also, I'd like to point out, and this goes into some of like Peter being crazy in this story arc. He refers to himself, and the captions refer to him as the Spider.
Mm-hmm.
He never really calls himself Spider-Man during this.
Until the later, where he's like, "I'm Spider-Man. I'm not Peter Parker."
Yeah, and he's not doing his. Well, yeah, that's the other thing is he's not doing Peter Parker at all. Like he's like, I hate like Spider-Man. Peter Parker says, "I hate Peter Parker." So moving into the second issue, Amazing Spider-Man 394. This is written by J.M. DeMatteis, who has done some of the stuff in the past few episodes. And DeMatteis has a past with Spider-Man. He wrote the iconic Kraven's Last Hunt story, and he had a spectacular Spider-Man run focusing on mostly Harry Osborn. And then obviously he's known for a lot of other work, which doesn't need a lot of explanation. And also, J.M. DeMatteis also had a run on Mark Spector Moon Knight. So again, it's a shame that Nick could not join us to just comment on that.
Can we talk about how fucking awesome Mark Bagley's art looks?
Yeah. So, well, real quick. So, DeMatteis has been writing Amazing Spider-Man since 389 at this point, which is not that long ago, just a few issues ago. And he picked it right up from David Michelinie, who had a long run. And then, yes, this is drawn by Mark Bagley, who's been on the book since about 351.
Oh, wow.
And of course, he has tons of Spidey work ahead of him. We're going to see a lot more Bagley during this podcast. And then, of course, he had another humongous run in Ultimate Spider-Man.
Well, we've seen him before with
that Bagley.
What we read, but his art style looked a lot different. This looks a lot more like his Ultimate style.
Yeah.
But the thing what I really think is cool is now, because like from looking at Ultimate Spider-Man and his Amazing Spider-Man, there's like very subtle differences to the way he draws them, but that's something we can get to down the road when we actually do the Ultimate Clone Saga.
Yeah. But yeah, I love Bagley Spider-Man, and I do have. I mean, some of it. I mean, it's not nostalgia. Again, we weren't even born at this point, but I do prefer kind of this like 90s version of Spider-Man that he was doing to Ultimate. Which again, it's a distinctly different style. Like Ultimate has the whole infamous like the haircut that Bagley designed for Peter Parker, and other things like that. It has and I think it was definitely intentional, but maybe it's not because he's done a few other books past Ultimate Spider-Man, and they've looked very similar to his Spider-Man work. Like he did a X-Men run somewhat recently. So the first few pages of this book, we just get Ben Reilly being a little angsty. And then we meet Vermin. Matt, are you a fan of Vermin?
No, I'm not.
That's because you don't like rats.
Yeah, I don't like rats. But I guess he serves a purpose.
Vermin?
No, he doesn't.
He says he is.
So Matt, where else would Spidey fans probably know Vermin from?
Kraven's Last Hunt. Yeah, that's about it.
Which again was by J.M. DeMatteis, but actually, DeMatteis created Vermin, and he was actually introduced in his Captain America run in the early '80s.
He's trying to push them royalty.
Yeah, and Kafka was also, I believe, created by DeMatteis. Kafka was introduced in the Harry Osborn stuff in Spectacular because Harry was going insane.
Yeah.
And also this second issue, we get some repeat, like it's pretty much a repeat where Spider-Man goes on the same tour of the asylum, showing us all the villains. And I mean, it's just slightly different reflections, and it ties into his like going crazy, screw the world like thing where he's like, when he sees Carnage, he goes like insane. And then he considers just murdering Chameleon.
And it's significantly wordier. DeMatteis is a very wordy writer.
Yeah.
Which I usually don't mind, but in this issue in particular, it felt kind of bogged down.
It kind of read pretty fast for me. It's when we get to the 4th issue that I felt that was really wordy and took forever to read.
So now we see Mary Jane's major plot comes in at this issue in a big way. So Mike, what city is Mary Jane going home to?
She's going to Pittsburgh.
Yep.
Yeah.
And she's gonna reconnect with her family or something like that.
Which I didn't know her family was from Pittsburgh.
I swear you've talked about that before.
I maybe you told me and I commented on it, but I legitimately I didn't remember at all.
All right, yeah. And so basically her Aunt Anna just says goodbye. And like we get like 2 pages of that, and that'll come back in the next issue. And Ben is just creeping in Aunt May's hospital room. And I kind of liked the scene though, because it's like he's sort of trying to reconcile, like, oh yeah, I'm this nobody, but I came to see Aunt May, but then like I have to acknowledge these memories. And it's actually he's kind of put in another situation that's similar to the What If issue that we read a long time ago, where the setup was like, oh, if I just do nothing, then Peter Parker's going to die and I can just totally steal his life. And he ultimately decides not to do that, and he's going to go help. And in the end, we see Judas has Pete locked up, and now he summons Ben because now there's 2 Spider-Men that he can study. Moving into the 3rd issue, this is Spider-Man 51, the Agitovist series. This is written by Howard Mackie, who he's been writing this title again like about half a year. And before this, he had a long run on Web of, and then later in 1999, he'll relaunch the entire Spider-Man line with John Byrne. And Mike, what do you possibly know Howard Mackie for?
I know Howard Mackie for a little book called Ghost Rider, starring Danny Ketch.
Yeah, Mackie wrote almost all of Danny Ketch's adventures and basically turned that into like a whole little line where you had lots of spin-off books. And he's also done some minor X-Men stuff like X Factor and a few Gambit miniseries. And also, Howard Mackie also wrote some issues of Mark Spector Moon Knight. So again, Nick could not join us.
You want to make it into the big time? You just got to write Mark Spector Moon Knight.
Yeah. And so this issue is drawn by Tom Lyle, who is probably more known by some DC fans because he had a run on Tim Drake's Robin series in the 90s.
I was going to say, that's where I recognized Tom Lyle's name from. So it was kind of a little bit of an eyebrow raise when I saw Tom Lyle on here.
And also the Roger Stern, Will Payton run of Starman.
Which you're getting custom bound.
Eventually, probably. So what did you guys think of the art and writing in this issue by Mackie and Lyle?
I dug the art. It's very different. Still very 90s, but also very different than the last two issues. And Ben's hair, I think, rose like 6 inches between issues, but other than that, I don't know. I think it's a pretty neat style.
I mean, kind of growing up on like hand-me-down issues of like old scattered Batman stuff, I've kind of just seen Tom Lyle's art since I was little. Right. So like, but like I've always liked Tom Lyle's art, so I just didn't know what his name was until more recently. But yeah, I've always liked his art.
Yes. So the interesting thing about this issue is this is technically the first time, publishing date-wise, we've already read The Lost Years and all that stuff, but this is the first time that Ben Reilly is named within a comic book.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he explains the meaning of his name to Comatose Aunt May.
Okay.
Also, now's maybe a good time. What did you guys think of Judas Traveler's Goons?
They remind me of Nightfall for a little bit. They remind me of like Bane's goons in Nightfall, but Bane's goons in Nightfall are cooler and slightly more interesting. I don't give a shit about any of these characters.
No, they're entirely forgettable. Did they name them? I can't remember their names.
One of them's named Chakra.
All right. So Chakra is like, she has like astral projection stuff and she summons them. And then there's like the tracker guy. I think his name's like Boone.
I thought Boone was the girl, but I don't fucking know.
You might be right. Well, there's a tracker guy, and then there's the girl who just like has a gun. Also, they're referred to as like the host. I guess that's like their squad name. And then there's one of them.
Gadget.
There's girl with big gun. There's girl with magic powers.
Yeah, and then the Inspector Gadget-looking guy, which I believe his name's like Mr. Noct or something like that.
Lights
and
my room. I gotta turn.
All he does is take notes. That's all he does.
Yeah.
In the story.
But there's a hilarious line where Judas Traveler's like, "I expect copious notes," and he's just like this guy, and he has like these giant glasses, but like the glasses are drawn in like this really cartoony way or something like that. Like he really sticks out to me. And you don't ever see him taking notes. Like he's just told to take notes.
He has a pencil and a notepad, and that's just.
And then there's Scryer, who I think he's finally named in this issue, or maybe it's not even until the last one. And Scryer, we know nothing about. He's just like this creepy gray dude with a
he
cloak.
randomly showed up. He wasn't even there at the beginning.
Yeah. And it's not clear what his purpose is because like it's kind of hinted. Like I felt like it was sort of explained that he had to do with like the barrier that Judas Traveler puts around, but like then Scryer tells him like that Judas Traveler can't maintain the barrier. So like I don't know why he's there.
But before we move on, I want to say that Chakra is fucking beautiful. Like not even just in her human form, but when she fucking like in that first issue when she turns astral, there's like all these colors. It's like done really well, and I'm really into this character, but I know she's probably not in like anything else.
Yeah.
You hear that? You hear that, Marvel? We got one Chakra fan.
Yeah. Dan Slott, you got 3 more issues.
Got one.
But we will see. She'll probably show up 1 or 2 more times. I know Judas Traveler and Scryer do. In this 3rd issue, we get a kind of cool, another one of those like dream sequence / hallucinations where Peter Parker just like sees all his villains and is freaking out. Which I think we saw that in like one of the previous issues as well. I think it was like Ben doing it maybe, and there was like some continuity questions I had about which villains he would even know.
I think it was in Lost Years we saw that.
Yeah, but I like that sequence. That's always a cool opportunity for an artist to just draw a shitload of villains. And there's like
I like Ben's quick change Spidey outfit.
Yeah, I don't want to like it, but I kind of dig it.
It looks pretty good. It looks better than it should, and that might just because of the person who's drawing it.
I think that might be it.
I mean, that goes back to like we made joke comments the first few episodes with Peter Parker's collection of coats and stuff like that, his jackets.
Yeah.
And it's just something like really weird how like he has this nice like jacket with the lapels and everything, and then he's got the Spider-Man mask on. And like
he's also got his knapsack on too.
Yeah. Here's the other thing. So Ben has like I guess he's had this leftover mask and he's had a leftover costume since like 5 years ago.
He had when he was the clone.
But do we technically see Ben use web shooters? I'm pretty sure we do.
No, I mean, yeah, he has them. You can see them on his wrists.
Yeah.
He has these big fucking clunky ones.
Did he swing through the city at the beginning of this issue when he leaves? Yeah, when he leaves Aunt May's hospital.
But I don't think he uses them during any of the fights.
I don't think so.
So my question is, Matt, does web fluid expire? Because he's possibly been carrying around this 5-year-old web fluid. But on the other hand, I guess technically he can make it, but since he hasn't been like doing super heroics, did he make web fluid randomly?
he has to have made it. I mean, I imagine it expires. I don't know how it could. I don't think it's been established though.
Yeah.
It's organic, isn't it? So it should, but
yeah, probably.
It's one of those things that's not consistent.
Jackal could be smart enough to have given him web shooters and make the formula. So I just took this as like he just had this was just part of the leftover costume he had when he was.
Yeah. No, I'm obviously I'm just being super nitpicky, but fights one of the female goon of Judas Traveler, and this is one of my favorite lines in this story, where he's like contemplating fighting this woman, and he's like, well, she's a woman, but so is Medusa, and he just punches her in the face.
I'm gonna use that excuse all the time to just hit women.
No.
We do not endorse that.
If we could splice in, like the students do not endorse Billy's comments. Billy's comments are not a reflection to the Students of S.H.I.E.L.D. conglomerate at all. There's his own.
I'm not gonna have him it up in here.
So now at the finale of the third issue, we finally have Ben Reilly intersecting again with Peter Parker, and they're going to help each other out. So moving on to the fourth issue.
But wait, at the end of the third, Ben's mask gets ripped, and then at the beginning of the fourth, it's magically.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah.
Yep.
He just sewed it up real quick.
Yeah, I feel like, does Peter's mask get ripped too? I feel like there's two sequences of mask getting ripped in this story.
Yeah, and it gets ripped in the same way.
Yeah.
He's true. I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, it's like it just rips off like the goatee kind of area.
Yeah.
They didn't even go for like a Tobey Maguire style where you can see the eyes. So the fourth issue is Spectacular Spider-Man 217. This is written by Tom DeFalco, who he's pretty much new to this book, but before this, he's had a big run on Amazing Spider-Man, like 7 years ago at this point. And that included the major symbiote suit stuff initially, but pre-Venom. And he's had plenty of more Spidey runs after this, and we're going to see lots of DeFalco throughout this podcast. And at this very moment, as this issue comes out, he's also editor-in-chief, but he's actually going to lose that position in a few months. And that's when Marvel, they try to do their weird thing where there's no editor-in-chief and they just have like 5 editors covering like giant sections of the line. And that was a terrible experiment.
Hey, you got this terrible idea. Let's implement it.
Yeah. So, and this issue is drawn by Sal Buscema, who almost all the Carrion stuff, or like half the Carrion stuff, was drawn by him. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned in that episode, at this point, Sal Buscema has been drawing Spectacular Spider-Man for about 100 issues and like 8 years in a row.
Christ.
What did you guys? I mean, I think you got. I think Mike and Billy and Nick were kind of mixed when we were doing the Carrion stuff. But what do you guys think about Buscema's art here?
I don't like it.
I'm not a big fan. I don't like the way he draws Ben in his in the costume I was just complimenting. I don't like the way his card. His card is really weird.
The spider on the Spider-Man costume's weird.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of iffy on like Carnage and stuff. I didn't necessarily notice that, but I actually really, really like this style of Buscema. And I said that when we talked about Carrion.
Like it's gotten more blockier since the Carrion stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is he has this blocky style, which
even
is
the
like
mustache on Judas Traveler's blocky. It looks. I don't like it.
And on the cover and a few other panels, you can see like you could almost argue that maybe he's like trying to take a little bit inspiration from John Romita Jr. or something like that.
Yeah, I thought it was John Romita Jr. when I first saw the cover.
But I actually really like it. Skipping ahead a bit, but this is just an art comment. And I said this, and it was controversial in the last episode, but I actually really like his Mary Jane. I don't know. She has like a weird look, but I really like the way he draws her.
I think I said his Mary Jane looked fine. So
she looks like a man. I'm not taking that back.
Okay, yeah. So in this issue, we finally get introduced to Scryer in the 4th issue, and he does nothing.
Yep. And
in the finale of the last issue, Peter breaks his chains that Judas Traveler had him in, and Ben finally shows up to like save him, and then they're very quickly teleported away to the basement. And Billy, how did you feel about Peter Parker's actions in this basement fight?
He's a dick.
Yeah, he's just a little bitch. It's like, I don't know what to say. I guess he's going insane because of fucking bullshit, but it's inexcusable, really. He's just an asshole.
He's kind of completely deranged. Yeah.
Ben Reilly is unquestionably right this entire storyline.
Yeah.
Yeah, Peter's just like gleefully like pummeling these goons' faces in.
Who or in a mental hospital, might I add.
Here's the other thing.
You can go.
Go ahead, Billy.
Okay, my favorite part is later on when Ben's like, we can't let Carnage go to the basement because he's going to kill all those people. And even though they try to kill us, they're still people. And then Peter's like, oh shit, he's right. They are people. Maybe we shouldn't just let them be murdered.
And then the next panel is him gleefully punching them all.
Yep.
There's a scene in the basement where, going back to web shooters, there's a panel where Peter like tries to use his web shooters and there's like a little limp thing going on. And he's like, oh no, there's something wrong with my web shooters. But then I don't think that never comes up again at all in the entire story. And I don't know if that was just a real quick thing to like show like just really quickly like, oh, they're kind of at a slight disadvantage because they can't use this ability. But like that never popped up again. You think that would be like in the climax. It's like, oh, Peter can't do this, so they have to collaborate. And also like, yeah, so Ben's like calling out Peter in the basement, and I can't tell like how much of it is just for the story, but then also like, is some of this like meta commentary, keeping in mind like some of the overall goals of the Clone Saga and also just the evolution of the 90s, even though the story is very emblematic of the 90s. Like Ben tells Peter, you've changed. You used to have a sense of humor.
Yes.
Why are you so bitter and angry? Peter, he tells him, Uncle Ben and Aunt May didn't raise you to be a dark vigilante.
He's not Batman.
But I liked their fight against Carnage. I mean, you don't actually see much. I mean, it's more like I like the captions and like just like the symmetry of the panel, sort of, even though it's like 3 panels.
I like the double drop kicks they do to his head.
Yeah. There's a panel where it's like Carnage in the middle and Ben and Peter coming from both sides, and then the caption is some like flowery stuff like they're in rhythm, perfectly aligned, or some stuff like that.
Which like
it has to be the shortest Carnage battle in history.
Yeah, no, it's bullshit.
They take him out in like 3 hits, and then they're moving on.
Yep, that's it.
So I'm gonna explain why this fight's bullshit, and then I have another point I want to make afterwards.
Okay.
But so Carnage is like one of, if not like the most powerful symbiote. Like, it required Spider-Man to work with Venom to fucking take him down the first time. Mm-hmm. So I don't see how having 2 Spider-Men equates like to the same thing. Carnage would easily murder both of them.
Bane. It's the same problem whenever you bring any type of big villain in. Every time you use them again, they get more and more diluted.
But they also comment later that like maybe the fight didn't even happen in the first place, and that it was just an illusion by fucking Traveler.
Yeah,
because we never see
that makes more sense.
The symbiote back, so Billy could be correct.
Yeah, and a point I wanted to make was that I think they were trying to set it up so that Ben and Peter had some sort of psychic connection, because in one of the issues, one of them says with great power, or one of them thinks about with great power comes great responsibility, and then the other one says it out loud.
Yeah.
And then in this fight, they're like perfectly in sync. But like, I don't see how being a clone would give you a psychic connection to the original.
The one
spider senses
inconsistencies with Spider-Man's spider sense, because he can't sense Ben because he's not really a person. or something like that.
Clones aren't real people.
Let's real quick touch on this. Mary Jane interlude. She's on her plane, still going to Pittsburgh, and I like some old lady saying that she misses her on Secret Hospital. But also, what happens to Mary Jane?
I'm guessing she's getting morning sickness because she's pregnant.
Yeah, that's what it is. She gets sick and she has to run to the bathroom, and so that's what it's hinting towards.
Or she ate some bad airline food and she's got a bad case of the shits.
All right, now I think this is like low key one of the funniest parts. Carnage, or this might actually be before the Carnage fight, but they come across another villain, and this villain's name is Wild Whip.
That's before the Carnage fight.
Yeah,
It's before Carnage
yeah.
fight.
And Wild Whip refers to himself as the greatest showman on earth, and he's not crazy. He just has a
He's not
a
Hugh
unique
Jackman.
perspective. And apparently Ben recognized him, and like he fought him in those like missing years. Yes, maybe there's like a flashback thing that's just not listed. This is Wild Whip's first and last appearance.
I'm fine with that.
But I just thought that was so weird because at this point, like publishing wise, the stuff we've read the last episode, the Lost Years,
It came later.
hasn't been published yet. I don't know why DeMatteis didn't put Wild Whip in a scene in that book.
Yeah, I wonder
mean,
why.
it doesn't matter, but
That forgettable.
yeah. So basically, they fight Carnage, and then they go to run down Judas, and then Judas just fucking runs.
There's a cool panel of them both breaking through glass.
Yeah, they break through the glass, and where does Ben end up?
He ends up in a
Dives into a
limo.
limo.
The limo explodes. Peter thinks he's dead again, and then like everything's kind of taken care of. Judas gets away, but like there's something with mail that's left.
Yeah, this doesn't make any fucking sense.
What?
So Judas Traveler, like, pretty clearly is a villain, and like Kafka was like talking to Spider-Man too afterwards, but he left a letter from himself to Kafka that's like dated from like a week ago, saying that he couldn't make it, and so Kafka's like, oh no, he's not a villain, it was an imposter.
What?
So it's a logical,
Like,
thing to conclude.
She like immediately thinks that. She's like, oh, I thought he was a cool guy, so it must not have been him.
Which she
Right.
must not check her mail like at all. Otherwise, she would have been like, "This was sent a week ago. Why am I just seeing it on top of my desk now?"
No, because remember when he shows up, she's like right when he settles in, she's like, oh, I'm gonna go to my office. I gotta check all these phone calls and shit. And then like right as that happens, he takes over everything. So maybe she just has a lot of mail piled up. And then we get two big like wink wink tease moments. Judas Traveler's in his car, and he says that Spider-Man has a curious sense of responsibility. And the clone is interesting too. But who did we see having a sense of responsibility this entire story?
Sure not Pete.
So it was Ben Reilly. So which one's the clone? Wink, wink.
Don't start with that shit.
Well, it's going to start soon. And then the second thing is, oh, Ben didn't blow up in the car. And he's in New York, and I guess he's going to stay. So the Clone Saga continues. So we touched on this a little bit, but what do you guys think of Judas Traveler overall? Matt, how would you rank him among the Rogues Gallery?
I liked Carrion more.
The iconic Spider-Man villain. He's bottom of the barrel. I also like Carrion more, and I don't like Carrion at all. So
I would have actually said I liked the villains that. Why is my mind suddenly running a blank here? I liked the Conway lame villains more than this guy.
Yeah.
I can agree with that also. I like
At least the Conway villains have like the animal,
The
kind of the
Grizzly.
animal theme going on.
So apparently DeMatteis was really into Judas Traveler, and he had big plans for him, and we'll see if he fulfills that.
Like,
Um,
God, why?
Cannot wait. I can't wait for this guy to come back.
yeah. So the kind of final status quo of this story, we got a few new shitty villains. The clone is back. MJ is on her way back, and
MJ's on the toilet.
And Pete's sanity is kind of on the way back.
Kind of.
So now with the first official episode of the Clone Saga, we might as well say
Give yourself all a pat on the back, because I was looking ahead, and guess what?
What's that?
The next issue, this is a little bit of fun. Remember how I've shared how I had the Scarlet Spider toy, the Marvel Legends Scarlet Spider? Marvel Legends came with a comic book. The next comic book we are reading, the next issue, is the same exact reprinted comic book that I had of the Scarlet Spider in its first appearance, and it will be the first time I'm reading that again since I was about in third grade. I am very excited.
That's kind of exciting.
All right. So why did the Clone Saga happen? So Amazing Spider-Man 400, 394 was in this story, and Marvel Editorial wanted something huge to rival other big events in the making. Like Age of Apocalypse would start in a few months after this. And in 1989, Ronald Perelman bought Marvel. And that's basically, it was kind of like near the peak of Marvel's creative and sales, thanks to the editorship of Jim Shooter, and then DeFalco kind of followed on that momentum for several years. And the quality in the books kind of continued for a bit, but as the 90s really get going, the new management, they just want to print cash. And so
we're about 3 years off from bankruptcy?
Yeah. Well, no, we're 2 years off.
We're 2 years?
Bankruptcy kind of, well, we'll see as we go along, but I think it like almost coincides with the end of the Clone Saga. So we're getting a shitload of new series, giant crossovers, gimmick covers, stretched out stories. We talked about how this is 4 issues. Doesn't really need to be.
No.
And the marketing department and everything like that really started creeping into the creative process. As for the actual story itself, so the idea of the Clone Saga, like at a kind of like an editorial retreat or whatever, it was brought forward by Terry Kavanaugh, who was the writer of the first issue here.
So he's the man we blame.
He's the man we blame, but also Terry Kavanaugh, in the grand scheme of things, among these 4 writers and among Marvel at this time, he's not a head honcho. So the only reason it fully went forward is that J.M. DeMatteis backed him up and was interested to tell this story. And spoiling a little bit, and we'll get to this as we go on, both Kavanaugh and DeMatteis, they bounce like a third of the way through. So now, Mike was talking about this. What do we have to look forward to? The 4 books, and actually we were talking about how these stories are stretched out. These 4 books actually now split in half for a while. Amazing Spider-Man and Spectacular Spider-Man deal with Peter, what he's going on with, and Web of Spider-Man and Ageless Spider-Man deal with Ben. But there's still 4-issue story arcs, I'm pretty sure, so it doesn't really matter. And the next one that we're going to be dealing with is the Exile Returns arc, which is Ben, and Billy should be excited because that's going to feature Venom.
Oh, that's cool.
All right. Any final thoughts on this Power and Responsibility story?
We're off to a good start.
We're I wouldn't say that. We're in with a thud.
Chakra is my future wife.
I mean
it's all uphill from here, right?
Happy about that.
Judas Traveler is shit, and like nothing really happened, but I don't hate it yet.
I don't hate it yet, but like
No, I don't hate it.
Very quickly how this could be quickly just awful. But
All
for
right.
Billy, you should be excited because Venom's in the next issue.
Yeah, I mean, he made an appearance in this one as a head, but
All right, so thanks.
We get very next issue. We get the Scarlet Spider costume. We get circle rim sunglasses. We get bad 90s fashion. We get the Scarlet Spider costume, and we get Venom.
all my favorite things.
Thanks for watching and tune in next time. Peace.